Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. It is finally time, as we've done before, to hit some of the comments that you guys have been commenting in this video. I do want to send out a thank you. Thank you to everybody. These help feed the algorithm. It helps get these videos in front of more people, which may end up creating more comments and more questions, but that is the end goal. I really appreciate these questions. All of the questions that come into contact@crpa.org. We want to continue answering these to potentially create more action going into the future. But before we get into those today, I do just want to say be sure and like, share, and subscribe to this video and to this channel. Like I said, the comments do. It really helps the algorithms to get these videos out there. So, Jacob, if you can pull the first comment up on the screen. This is from the DOJ video that we did talking about the lawsuits in front of Benitez. The question comes from MBJS for us. It says, can you give an estimate on the timeline for completion of these cases? Chuck mentioned that Judge Benitez will most likely complete the cases by the end of summer. But what can happen after that? I'm sure that this crummy state will appeal. What's the next step if they do, and how long can these cases drag on? So probably, you know, one of the more unfortunate side of the way that the courts work, this video came out several weeks ago, and here we are in September, and Judge Benitez still hasn't dropped the cases. So, you know, we meet all the deadlines, and it is the plaintiffs and the defendants that get all the deadlines for these lawsuits, but the person who doesn't have the deadline is the court. Now, if you've been keeping up, you know, Judge Benitez has had some complications with his eyes. I think he maybe even had surgery on his eyes. I don't know if that is what's, you know, kind of creating the time lapse here with these lawsuits. We are still looking forward. We are ripe for the decision on these. I think we all know, you know, which way they're going to go. They're going to go in our favor. He's already ruled on them once. But if there is something we know about Judge Benitez, is that he wants to get the decision right. So, you know, we're now in the post-Bruen era. And just like before then, Judge Benitez took the time to write an 82-page decision that was very thorough and very well thought out. There's no reason to believe that he won't want to do that again with the Bruen decision from the Supreme Court. As far as the latter part of that question, you know, obviously, yes, our assumption is that the state is going to appeal it to the Ninth Circuit. They already have a track record of appealing this, and then we ended up appealing it to the Supreme Court. But they originally appealed it to the Ninth Circuit, at least the Duncan case, and then they appealed it also to a Ninth Circuit en banc panel. So there's no reason for us to believe that they won't do it. And hey, look, you know, before these were remanded, these lawsuits started in 2016. Rhodey and Duncan, I believe, both started in 2016. It is a process for them to go through the courts. I guess what we really end up looking for is whether or not we can place an injunction that would stop the law from being enforced while it is being litigated. That ends up being the most important thing. And I know that we got that for part of the Duncan case, so that 10-round magazines were not automatically made illegal, even grandfathered ones. So people are able to keep that. That originally is what gave us the Freedom Week the first time that went to Judge Benitez. So the overall answer is laws are litigated for years, and this is why it's important for us to elect officials that won't create these laws in the first place. But as far as enforcement is concerned, it can be important to get injunctions while they continue to be litigated. All right, to the next one from our video talking about how Gavin Newsom was trying to you know, push this 28th Amendment from Windstream 9810. Newsom lets out thousands of criminals in California, wants to take away guns from law-abiding citizens, has his own armed security force, state and private, makes our California schools gun-free zones. Who is he really protecting? And I think this is actually something that with national media and a lot of alternative media that's coming out now, it's becoming more and more apparent. You know, there's a certain class of people in America, a lot of them politicians, who are just above everybody, seem to be above everybody else. And this is the question that a lot of them get asked. If you're going to take away my guns, why are you going to be able to continue and have armed security? That is a contradiction. And the Second Amendment was put in place for a reason. Actually, some would say this exact reason, to fight against a tyrannical government. Obviously, the origin story of that was a tyrannical government across the sea, but ultimately our self-defense needs to be available to us if that tyranny does come here. And I think a lot of people consider in many ways that it has, which makes the Second Amendment all the more important. I actually, I was scrolling through some social media and I saw a guy make a comparison on gun control. He basically said, you know, you have this problem of drunk drivers in the United States. So, you know, as opposed to doing anything to the drunk drivers, let's just make driving for everybody who does it lawfully illegal. And if you got that scenario, that's basically what gun control is. And he couldn't have been more spot on, because we continue to see laws passed and bills created that inhibit the law abiding from, you know, exercising these Second Amendment rights, while we have an apps system that our law enforcement knows of over 25,000 criminals who are illegally in possession of firearms in California that they do nothing about. They also continue to pass legislation that allows people to get out of jail early who are violent criminals who have used firearms in their criminal activity. So a lot of contradictions there, and I think part of what our mission ends up being is the overall education of this. There are just too many people in California who don't know. There are too many people in California who are getting their ballots harvested who need to make this a priority to vote for themselves with the education that they have. So as we push forward, especially into the 2024 elections, these sorts of things are going to be hot topics. So on to the next one from the handgun roster video from Chendo Rodriguez, 940. I never understand the roster requirements because Beretta 92s are on it. The only thing a Beretta has is a chamber load indicator. So this is kind of the common misunderstanding of the handgun roster. First of all, I think there were three I don't want to say iterations, but you know, there was the creation and then there were three additions to it. So the Unsafe Handgun Act comes out, and I think essentially what you have is a drop test there, but later on, the magazine detachment mechanism and the chamber load indicator end up being added as requirements. And then later, after that, you have the micro stamping that's added as a requirement. But as all of those things were added as requirements, firearms that were currently on the roster were grandfathered into it. Which is why when we're making, you know, if you actually watched our Ninth Circuit argument, on the handgun roster, our attorney, one of the first comments that she made is that it's ironic because according to California standards, not one firearm on the handgun roster is legal. The only reason why we're able to purchase them here is because those firearms are grandfathered in. But if you put any of those firearms up to the regulations that are actually required in the Unsafe Handgun Act, none of them meet all of those qualifications. Most of them just because of microstamping, but a lot of them, like the Beretta 92 that has the chamber load indicator but not the magazine detachment mechanism, which is why when we were seeking our injunction, which you know is what we're appealing at the Ninth Circuit here. We were searching for those three things to not be enforced, because without those three things, yes, there's still a handgun roster, but firearms can come on and off of it basically much more freely without those requirements and just a drop test requirement. Which, you know, drop test requirements are pretty standard within the firearms community now. We would essentially be able to start importing a lot more handguns. But I understand the confusion there. These things came on in tiers, and there were always firearms grandfathered on. So that's the explanation for that. So on to the next one. Again, from our handgun roster video. From Frank McGowan, 9457. Post Bruin, how does any current California gun law pass constitutional muster? They all need to go. So I can't necessarily say I disagree with you there, Frank. And the answer to your question is really none. which is why Gavin Newsom has such a poor record in court these days. When you're looking at all these decisions coming out, all of them are being called unconstitutional, or they're being remanded down because the Ninth Circuit thinks that the federal district court got it wrong. Either way, the overall answer to the question is none. But what needs to be looked into is really the playbook of the anti-Second Amendment legislators in California. They know that these gun laws are unconstitutional. So it's not necessarily about being constitutional or unconstitutional. It's about having a supermajority of anti-Second Amendment legislators in California being able to pass unconstitutional laws, because the framework of our country, the legislature and the judiciary are two separate branches. They are made as checks and balances on each other. But the legislature isn't necessarily beholden to the Constitution the way that the judicial branch is. So what ends up being important is that we get legislators elected who actually care about our constitutional rights. And when it comes to Second Amendment in California, we have a supermajority of legislators that don't. So they will continue to pass unconstitutional laws that they know will be struck down in court. But hey, they consider that a win when you have months, sometimes even years, of unconstitutional laws being enforced in California, which is definitely something that we don't want, which again is why we look towards the 2024 elections. We need to make a change now. We have seen the pendulum swing back and forth in California before. It's going to require work, and we're doing it now, but we need to continue doing this work so that even if we just don't have a supermajority in California, a lot of these laws are going to be a lot harder to pass, which means we can make a lot more progress on the pro-Second Amendment legislation side. But speaking of things changing, if you guys haven't noticed, I got a new hat on. In a couple of videos, we even have some new hoodies, some new shirts. If you like the colorful stuff here, go ahead and check out the CRPA store. You can find that at crpa.org. We're trying to come out with some more fashionable attire. So if you guys want to rep CRPA, if you want to let people in your community know, hey, I support the Second Amendment and I do it through the California Rifle and Pistol Association, head on over to the store. It's pretty reasonably priced, and you can rep your CRPA stuff for the upcoming seasons. I think we got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. Not a bad time to think about your Second Amendment rights. But so let's get back into these here. This is from our Why Businesses Are Leaving California video from Jeff. These gun-grabbing agencies have lawyers drawing up bills, and then they shop them around until they get sponsors. Why isn't the 2A community doing the same? Draft up a bunch of pro-2A bills and get sponsors for them in the state and federal legislatures. So yes, Jeff, I understand where you're coming from. I also understand why it might seem like we're not doing this, but the pro-Second Amendment agencies are absolutely doing this. What it comes down to is whether or not the legislators themselves feel that they will benefit from carrying these bills. And actually, quite frankly, we have a couple of people in California who are on the tickets as Democrats that have run pro-Second Amendment legislation in California. But at the end of the day, this is like a culture change, because if the legislators themselves don't see any benefit by running these pro-Second Amendment bills, they're simply not going to run them. But if the critical part of this question is that the Second Amendment community is or isn't shopping pro-Second Amendment bills, the community absolutely is. It's a matter of the legislators themselves actually feeling whether or not they would benefit in their careers and whether or not the state would benefit from actually taking up these bills and running them. Because believe it or not, with an anti-Second Amendment supermajority in the legislature, some of these legislators, they consider carrying a pro-2A bill as a liability on their career. So that's a culture that we certainly need to change, and we will have the power to change in 2024 when we go through the election process again, that we seek to change that culture. But until then, we are absolutely going to continue shopping pro-Second Amendment bills. What we need to change is the outlook in the legislature. So from the same video, Sham, the irony of this stupid bill from Dave Min is that he was arrested for drunk driving. all of his lunacy against guns, and he's happy to operate a killing machine whilst inebriated. Well, Sham, that is not a question, but let's just be honest. I couldn't help myself from putting that in here because it is absolutely true. So thank you for contributing to our algorithm while speaking the truth. All right, so from Sarge, on the Ninth Circuit throws out California ban on free speech. He says, every time I see one of these wins, my frustration grows. I know the courts move slow, but while they're dragging things out without issuing an injunction, the people are still restricted by whatever law is involved. And it's that fact that I believe the proliferation of more and more similarly unconstitutional laws. These people passing the laws, they know that the laws will be struck down, but they also know that it'll be months, years, and even decades before they are. And in the meantime, our rights are infringed. So yeah, I mean, I kind of addressed this with one of the comments earlier, but that's not far off the truth. You know, the courts move slowly, and what it ends up coming down to is that is the playbook of the anti-Second Amendment legislators in California, as well as our governor. They know perfectly well that a lot of these laws are unconstitutional. They know perfectly well that their record in court will suffer, but where they see their, you know, their profit margin, if you will, is in the meantime, the time that Californians' rights are restricted by the unconstitutional laws that they put in place while we continue to litigate, which is why, you know, in every single lawsuit, an injunction is asked for. You know, sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't, but what ends up being important to us is understanding that these laws take a long time to litigate in the courts. To have them not be enforced while we litigate ends up being incredibly important. We've seen a couple of big injunctions come out soon, but that is the playbook. And again, that playbook can be changed and deterred if we coming up to the 24 election season, if we change the outlook of our legislature, it's going to be a lot harder for them to pass these unconstitutional laws in the first place. And then finally, from our video, tell Newsom to veto AB 28. Here's why it's important. The question comes from Sean 71976. Why would he veto the bill? He doesn't care what we want. This bill is part of his agenda. Sean, you are correct. This bill is part of his agenda, and we believe he would absolutely not want to veto this bill. Just as a refresher, if you didn't catch our video on AB 28, the Senate finally did pass AB 28, which is an 11% excise tax. That would be an additional 11% tax on your purchases on firearms, ammo, and firearms-related products. In some cases, you're now looking at paying upwards of 30% tax on a bill or a receipt that, you know, is hundreds and hundreds of dollars. This is going to deter a lot of people, specifically that don't have a whole lot of means as far as income is concerned, from being able to protect themselves. But ultimately, the reason why it's important to ask him not to veto this bill is because we know we're going to challenge it in court. We absolutely assume that Gavin Newsom is going to sign this bill. We are prepared to file a lawsuit against it. But when the lawsuits come up and testimony becomes a thing within these lawsuits, you know, they have to establish that there is harm, and it is incredibly beneficial for us to establish that the public does not want these bills to be passed. One of the ways that we can do that is a letter writing campaign to Gavin Newsom before he even signs it, asking him not to sign the bill. So, you know, it can be said that the voice of the public is heard when it comes election season. I know that there are a lot of questions surrounding elections these days, but what certainly can also be heard as the public's voice is a letter writing campaign to Gavin Newsom asking him not to sign this bill before he signs it. So we're continuing to do that. We're continuing to do that with Senate Bill 2 also, because we know that these can be lawsuits and most likely will be lawsuits to come once he actually signs that bill. So these are the comments that we've had. Guys, if you want to see your question addressed, or if you have a question in general Always feel free to hop on to email. You can email us at contact@crpa.org. We can try to answer your questions there. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. Drop these comments, ask these questions. We want to get the information out there so that everybody can be educated and have the Second Amendment as a priority when it comes election season in 2024. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.